I hate it when people applaud before you've done anything. Well, yeah, quite possibly. I remember many years back when I was working in the prison service, we had a big conference, and they invited the prison chaplain to come and say grace before the conference dinner. And he said he was a little bit concerned. It always bothered him that you were thanking God for the food before you'd tasted it. And he was discussing this with his bishop a little bit later. And his bishop assured him that if the food turned out to be awful, it was okay to contact God afterwards and rescind the grace. So if at the end you feel you applauded for nothing, you can unclap at the end. So what I really wanted to talk about was the idea that we are supposed to be service managers now. We've heard about service management a lot and managing the service. But most people in IT service management are actually IT people. And it occurred to me that there is a fundamental difference between the two kinds of people. I mean, a great service manager is concerned about delivering what the customer wants without needing to take the credit for it, to deliver what the customer's hopes and desires are rather than their own. And really, they should be concerned about the end product, as David said this morning, the outcomes, not just doing what we said we were going to do. On the other hand, IT people are happiest when things break. Most people that I know in IT got into IT to play with the toys. And they like to fiddle with things, they like to fix things. They enjoy understanding how things are done, not why we're doing them or whether we're doing the right thing. And the picture in the middle is obviously the space shuttle. And I was at home talking to my youngest daughter when she was probably about 8 or 9. And there was a picture of the space shuttle, and I thought it was an amazing thing, fantastic piece of technology and wonderful. And she looked at it and said, "Oh, yeah, that's the thing that goes up and down to the space station, isn't it?" It was boring, it was everyday, and it had been around longer than she'd been alive. And I sort of had this realization that technology isn't amazing if you're young. So the important thing really, we're supposed to be service managers, and we've looked at outcomes, and I'm going to use this word a lot now. So we're thinking about service managing, and who's the customer, and what service do they get from us? And this is an analogy I've used before, including at previous Spanish conferences, but hell, it works, so I'm going to carry on using it. The picture on the left is the Pont du Gard in the Ardèche, and people come from thousands of kilometers away to admire it. The thing on the right is the basin in the center of Nîmes. Now, the bridge is actually an aqueduct on a 36-kilometer water supply canal. And it's amazing, and it's wonderful, and it's impressive. But in IT service management terms, it's an application. It's a clever, very, very well done element of a service. If we're going to judge the service, we need to look at the basin on the right. The whole canal, including that aqueduct, exists for the sole purpose of there being drinking water in that basin. And no matter how well the aqueduct worked, if some other part of the service doesn't work, then it's a failure. Now, the Romans, 2,000 years ago, when that was built, had an interesting approach to project management that failed. They would take the failed project manager and crucify him by the side of the road. Now this has some advantages we might want to resurrect in times of economic difficulty. It certainly focuses the mind, and it creates promotion opportunities. But I'll leave that to your own company policy about whether you adopt it or not. But interestingly, the stars are there to remind me, if you look in the Michelin guide for the Ardèche, the basin, which to me is the important part, only gets 1 star, but the aqueduct gets 3. So, we're still fascinated with applications rather than service, even in this context. There's a line from Arthur C. Clarke, which says that any suitably advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I think we're seeing that more and more these days. I would extend that idea to say that we should be encouraging our customers to treat what we deliver as magic. They don't need to understand it to make use of it. We all know how to use an iPhone. Very few people know how it works. Doesn't stop you using it. And the example I use, I took this from two people called Ian Stewart and Jack Cohen, who are popularizers of science. The thing on the very left there is an amazing magic cupboard that we have in our kitchen at home. Amazing thing, you open the door and you put dirty clothes into it. Then you add this special magic white powder that you get from the supermarket. And you set the prayer wheels to the special positions and you press the magic button. And 2 hours later, the magic has worked and the clothes are clean. Now, you can believe that, or you can spend days researching how washing machines work and how enzyme detergents loosen the tomato ketchup from the cotton polymer chains and how the scavenge pump pulls the water out the pump and all the technological details. And when you know all that, it doesn't run any faster and the clothes are no cleaner. So you might as well treat it as magic. And our customers should be able to treat what we deliver as magic, because if they've got time to understand everything about the technology, they've got time to do some research and get better at the jobs they're paid to do, which will be a more useful way to pass their time. And we all of us do actually treat IT as magic at some point. The picture in the middle is the electron distribution. I'll try that one again. The electron distribution in a silicon atom. It's about how Heisenberg's uncertainty principle allows some electrons to break out. Well, you knew all that. The point is, most people don't know that, but we think we know how IT works. That's a level of magic most of us stopped before. And if you don't believe it applies to everybody, Stephen Hawking's book, A Brief History of Time, has a line in it where he says, and at this point, you just have to accept that that is the way the universe is. So if Stephen Hawking admits that you take something at magic at one point, I think that it applies to all of us. So I think encouraging our customers to have faith in the magic is interesting. And maybe one of the reasons that many of them don't is because IT has a reputation. And it has a reputation of doing things badly that I think it probably deserves. So that's what I think we're doing. So good service manager, as I said, it's about intuition and understanding what the customer needs. And you do need more than just conversation. You need to understand. And there are other stakeholders as well. And you need to understand how important and useful invisibility is. Because if I'm getting a great service from somebody, I don't want to see it. It's like the bridge we talked about in the service, but if you imagine you go to the movies and you come out from the cinema, having seen the film, and you turn to your partner and you say, you know, I think that was the best film editing I ever saw. Trust me, it was a bad film. If you come out saying, oh, I really felt for that woman at the end, that was a good film, if it got to you emotionally and you were living it, if you could see the editing wasn't right, and if people can see the mechanics of how we deliver a service, maybe that's not what we want. We want to not be seen. People only see us if things go wrong. How often do you want to see your doctor? You want to know he's a good doctor, but you don't want to see them very often. So I like to put pictures on my slides, and it's very difficult to come up with a picture to show invisibility. But my daughter helped me out with a cartoon. I think that is the best picture of invisibility I've ever come across. So if we're going to be able to support our customers properly, one of the things that you need as an IT service provider is that you need a degree of management support. And management needs to empower us to do things or absolutely direct you what's right. I remember many years ago I was told to go and represent our branch in the early days of ITIL at a meeting. And I came back saying I'd agreed to do something. And my boss said to me, well, that's not what I would have committed us to. But I empowered you to go and do it, and if that's what you've committed us to, we will stick with it. And I thought that was very good. And it was her fault for sending me. But her attitude was, if we empower you to go and do it, then we've empowered you to make the decision. You know, unless it's, as David said, we can't afford it or it's illegal, then that's what we will go with. So unless you give absolute directions, people need to know their decisions will be honoured. Because otherwise, you send people to meetings, you go and talk to customers, you commit to things and then you change your mind afterwards. That's not the way to be nice to your customers. And if you really want to find out what your customers are doing, don't ignore the obvious. Do a lot of health checks on customers, and one of the things that always amuses me is that you go out and talk to people, and I would always insist on spending at least 2 hours on the frontline service desk, sitting down with service desk operators and hopefully listening into their conversations with people and listening to what they believe the users and customers get annoyed about. And they know actually how the users feel. Document that up in fancy words, come and present it to the CIO at the end of the week. And you typically get a response that says, yes, that's why we like to bring external consultants in, because you have the objectivity to see things that we don't see from where we are sitting. And you think, if he'd stood up and walked down the corridor and talked to his own service desk staff, he would have known all this for free, instead of paying me $1,000 a day to find it out for him. One company I went to where the IT services manager really understood what was going on, he was married to the service desk supervisor. That man had a better picture of what was upsetting his users than any senior IT guy I've ever met. There are probably other ways of dealing with it that are less traumatic than that, but it worked. And the picture of the Wormwood Scrub prisons in England is there to remind me of a story from my days in prison. No, I should rephrase that. From the days when I worked for the prison service. Way before IT, we were working on what they called the personal kit system. They wanted to reduce the cost of prisoner clothing. And in those days, you issued the prisoner prison uniform, and then at the end of a week, you took it back and you washed it, and you gave them other prison clothing. There's no likelihood that you would get the same item back again. And amazingly, the prisoners didn't take care of their clothes. And someone in the clothing department had the idea that if we gave them the same ones back every time, they'd take more care of it, they'd last longer, and it would save money. So they decided they would introduce it, called the personal kit system. And they decided they would start with things that mattered most to people, like their underwear. And so I happened to be in prison with another job, and we were sitting over tea break talking to some prisoners. And we said we were going to try this out, and they said, no, you got it wrong. We're not worried about underwear, we're worried about best jeans and T-shirt. And we said, what? I said, no, seriously, put yourself in our position. We're in prison, we see our wives or our girlfriends maybe once every 2 weeks. When they come to see you, you want to look good. That matters more than anything else. I don't care who's worn the underwear before. It's not a nice thought, I know. But it is not intuitive. You sit in a nice civilized out-of-prison world, you make presumptions about what will matter most. You need to go in there and actually ask these people what matters to them. We got a very different answer. We implemented the kit system with T-shirts and jeans, and it made an enormous difference to the wear on those items. They expanded it to other things later, but it was right. We would have done the wrong thing if we hadn't actually spoken to the inmates and understand that it's a different world in there. One thing you learn in prison is it's a very different place. And the other thing about learning it is a very silly story. Ricard talked about the ITIL in small IT organizations that Sharon Taylor and I wrote. We had an idea for the front cover that was thrown away, and TSO, the publishers, put that picture on the right on the front cover. They decided it was a nice, neutral picture of a woman in a call center. Now, how you get from a call center to a small IT organization was beyond me. But they decided that was a good picture. Turned out we couldn't sell it in Saudi Arabia because the cover was considered to be pornographic. Now, you've got to think these things through and understand all your customer base before you make these decisions. Yeah. So nearest I've ever got to being directly involved with pornography. my defence. So it's management's role to set the scope of things, and management needs to know who the players are, set some channels up to empower them and to understand what you're doing, including getting the funding. In my experience, one of the worst things is telling people that we're going to find out what needs to change, but then there's no money to change it. Really, I'd rather not know what it is that we can't afford. You know, it's a waste of money finding out things if you haven't got the money to drive it down. You need to realise you need enough knowledge to do your job and to find out what people are there, not collect data for its own sake. Because nobody in IT ever would collect data just for its own sake, would they? People in IT aren't collectors of data, or perhaps they are. Know what you don't know. Crucially, know what you'll never know and stop worrying about it. Every place I've been, there are things we just can't measure yet. You know, look every few months to see if there's a way yet, but don't try and collect it if you think you can't. And understand what you're doing. The picture's there to remind me of a story from the Netherlands many years ago. The chief executive of Shell, multinational oil company, retired and made a living for a while on TV shows and chat shows and as a business consultant. And he was being interviewed on Dutch television. And they asked him, how on earth do you guide such an enormous animal as Shell, one way or the other? And he said it was like being the mahout, the man that rides the elephant. His job was to be closer to the elephant than anybody else. And when he felt it beginning to move to the left, his job was to stand up and shout left as loudly as he possibly could. Yeah. About being seen to be in charge, perhaps. But certainly, it's about recognizing the inevitable. If it is inevitable, then go with it. Yeah. Yeah. It's much better than turning right, anyway. So, you need to find out what you need to know. Another talk I used to do is about the importance of involving the customer, and I'll come back to that later, but it hinges around the idea of it's much harder to be a vet than a doctor. And it's hard to be a vet because a dog can't tell you where it hurts. With a doctor, you can say, where does it hurt? With a vet, you just poke the dog until it bites you. Ah, right, that's where the problem is. We have the ability to treat our customers as if we were doctors and ask them, talk to them, find out what happens. In far too many places I've been, we've acted like vets. We just poke them until we find out when they scream. Now, the problem with being a doctor compared to being a vet is that dogs don't lie to you. So imagine I'm going to the doctor with a known problem of high cholesterol, and he asked me what I had for breakfast yesterday. Now, the picture at the bottom, I have to confess, actually is my breakfast from a few years ago. At my cousin's in Brisbane in Australia, and it did the job. It was medicinal, and it cured the hangover. But if I'm going to the doctor and that was my breakfast the day before, and he asks me what I have for breakfast, the answer is fruit salad. So we do have to cope with our customers possibly not telling us the whole truth. And that requires some understanding of the industry and the business, and we've got to get out there and walk a while in their shoes to know these things. True story, back from 1999 and then 2000, I was working in a company that sold an integrated service management product. They've been at this event before and they're not this time, so they're not going to get a plug. We wanted to predict how many implementation consultants we'd need the next year. So we'd ask our sales director, how many new systems do you expect to sell next year? And she'd say something like 80. So we'd say, okay, we need enough consultants to put about 20 new systems in, because she likes to exaggerate. She would set a high target to really motivate her people, not expecting to reach it. Worked the next year with another company called Support Magic, who were quarterly results-driven company. Talking to them about that, and they said, oh, we ask our sales team, how many do you expect to sell next year? And they'll say 50. So we know we need enough consultants to put at least 120 new systems in, because their sales team is paid a bonus on how much they exceed their sales target. So they lie in the opposite direction. Same question, companies in exactly the same market lie in different ways. You need to know what kind of people you're talking to and what you're coming back from them. Was a very good breakfast, though. Right. This is the first year I've ever been at this conference in Spain without Paul Wilkinson doing the same talk. So, in Paul's honour and his absence, I felt obliged to plug his book. But it is actually relevant. We've all heard that IT service management is about people, process, and technology. Most companies, it tends to be technology, process, and damn it, there was another thing. What is it? We tend to forget about the people side of things, and it's the one that causes the most damage. And if you've listened to Paul over the years, he's absolutely right. The attitude, behaviour, and culture of ICT issues causes more trouble, costs more money, gets more things wrong than anything else. We know we get technology right because the vendors make sure we know about technology. We get process right now because we've had ITIL and ISO 20000 and COBIT who are process focused. We still don't get the people bit right. But there are some tools to help us. Paul's book is good. And there are things like simulations, and we're running one tomorrow. It's not just our company that does them. Other simulations are available, Paul's and HP's and BMC and all sorts of people. The message is the same. They make people understand their role in the bigger issue. They make them realise that they're not just fixing an IT problem, they're trying to support the company. But that's the message to get through. My sort of personal cynical vision of IT over the last 10 or 15 years is that it's full of really, really good people working really hard, as hard as they can, to get better and deliver quicker and cheaper at delivering the wrong thing. We have a tendency to focus on improving what we're doing before we step back and ask if we're doing the right thing. Because it's easier. Continual service improvement is great. And as soon as it replaces continual process improvement, it will deliver goods. But too many people are still doing continual process improvement. What are we doing now? How can we do it better? And there are other questions come beforehand, and I'm sure Vern will tell us all about those in a bit. If we just focus on getting better at what we're doing, it might make us a bit better, but it really misses a great opportunity to be a lot better. And I put this presentation together about 6 months ago, which is why it's got the Norwich City Football Club logo in there. At that point, Norwich were about third in the championship, one division down from the top in football in England. And there are two attitudes among Norwich supporters. One is, we stand a chance of getting promoted to the top division next year. And a lot of supporters who really would quite like to just fail and carry on supporting a winning team in a lower division than supporting a team who are likely to last 1 year and come straight back down again and spend a year watching them lose a lot. And there's two attitudes. I'm pleased to say Norwich did get promoted, and they're actually doing quite well in the Premier League this year. More luck than judgment sometimes, taking a point off Liverpool, but we're doing good. But there was a serious attitude that says, let's be really good in a lower division. And I think there's an IT attitude to that as well, of let's just get really good at what we're doing, because it's too hard to step back and think what other things to do. The Hippocratic Oath in medicine says the first thing is do no harm. But sometimes you have to take that risk. If you're in a competitive industry, a company that doesn't take risks in a competing industry is going to go out of business to one that did and got lucky. And if you're one of 10 companies, the other 8 take risks. 2 of them may go out of business, but 2 of them will kill you. So most of us are in an industry where risk-taking has to happen. Areas where risks is perhaps a less obvious thing. A good customer of ours in Chicago, Northwest Memorial Hospital in Chicago. His statement, he said to us, was, IT is now recognized as the major risk to the organization. And that's not a problem statement for him, that's a statement of his success. He actually had badges made that said, "We are your biggest risk," and the IT team are wearing them. And the reason he's proud of it is because the business and the audit teams have recognized them as the biggest risk. That means they trust them. There is no alternative. They've just built a new hospital with no paper store. If the IT fails, you don't know what medication to give the patient. And they've taken that risk because they now trust IT. Now, they audit them a lot and they check them. But the fact that they're recognized as a risk means they're trusted. And they are now the sole way of judging it. I asked him what is the real metric for IT support in the hospital? And he said, "We don't actually publish it, but the real measure of our success is how many people did IT kill last year." And the real worry is that the correct answer is not 0, because that would be too expensive. As long as we kill a lot less people than the old systems did, then that's progress. Now, you may not want to dwell on that too much. We kill people nowadays with IT. And it's not a new thing. It's got to be about 6-7 years ago. I was doing a training course in London. And important things first. Said to them, "What time do you need to leave?" And they said, "Oh, it'd be really good if we can get away before 4:15 and to get out before the traffic gets really bad, provided we don't have the situation we had the other Tuesday when the whole of London locked up." Don't know what happened. Somebody sitting 3 seats away from him looked up and said, "I'm really sorry about that, I was tired." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he worked for Transport for London, and he'd come back after lunch. Whether the lunch involved beer or not, I don't know. But he said he was sitting in his desk, and he yawned and stretched, and as he stretched his foot out, his foot just caught the power button of the server underneath his desk. That server was running the traffic light control system for central London, because that's where they developed it, and it worked, so they didn't move it. And it sounds funny, except you realise he almost certainly killed people, because the traffic locked up. Ambulances couldn't get through. Somebody that probably would have lived if the ambulance had reached them or had got them to hospital died that afternoon because he was tired, or because somebody hadn't thought it through beforehand. You blame where you like. But that simple level of IT can kill people nowadays when it goes wrong. This is also from that hospital. He wasn't interested if the number of incidents went up. He had to know because he needed more people on the desk. He set as a target impact to the business. Completely changed the way they prioritised what they looked at. That's all they changed, their prioritisation on which incidents to look at. And he drove down the impact, but the number of incidents went up. And he's very proud of that graph. To show it's true, it all went a little bit wrong in the last September. And if we were trying to impress, we'd have cut September off, just to prove that that's true. Getting changes to stick. Remember, service management is also different from traditional IT. It's not a project. John Lennon was interviewed once about the difference between being a house husband, which he was for a while, running the house, and being a pop star. And being Lennon, he called the reporter some kind of idiot, but then he answered him. He said, you write a new song and you record it, and you get it right and you do it again and you do it wrong. About 4 o'clock in the morning, you've got the song right, you go home, you wake up the next afternoon. And there, you've got the song, you listen to it, you feel really proud. You clean the house, you make a great dinner, the family comes home, messes the house up, eats the dinner, and the next day you have to do it all again. And service management is like that. No matter how good and how correct you got the service delivered today, you're going to have to do it again tomorrow. It's not like crucifying people by the side of the road. If you overstay, you're welcome. Yeah. Wouldn't worry about it. The pictures don't say that much anyway. We're 2 minutes from the end. the other big point, really the summary at the end I wanted to make, is that we've got a real change we're trying to get. We're trying to get a real variation between attitude change between what people have been like and what they need to be like, and it's not a trivial one. And the pictures I got up here to illustrate it are pictures of 2 Skoda cars. Anyone remember what Skodas used to look like? Really, really cheap. There was an old joke about a Skoda. What do you call a Skoda with twin exhausts? And the answer is a wheelbarrow. Volkswagen bought the company and transformed it. It's amazing difference. And in the UK, we had a whole advertising campaign built upon the fact, that can't be a Skoda. It looks good. Yeah. The one at the bottom is a good car. It's that level of change we're trying to do. This is not a 2-day course and people come back aware of how to be service management. This is a change in attitude, a change in culture we're trying to do. So this is a big issue. And the point I said at the bottom, peripheral stakeholders, people who aren't the real customer, can cause real damage. We've probably all worked for companies where you all know it's the right thing to do, but finance don't approve it. Very quickly, just go through the last slide. What can possibly go wrong? People can. I asked my daughter for a scary picture, and she gave me the one on the top, a friend of hers. I haven't told her, Evie, we're using it, but there you go. People resist change, and if you don't believe that all people resist change, go to your change management team and tell them you're going to change the change management process, and watch their reaction. They will resist it as much as anybody else. And the last thing I just want to say, that's the picture at the bottom of my greatest success in this business. I was doing a simulation game. These 4 guys came in, 3rd level technical support, you can tell. Jeans, scruffy hair, dodgy shirts, large beer bellies. So they can only be techies. And I put them in the business roles. It was an HP simulation, actually. So they were running the Formula 1 team. And in the middle of the afternoon, one of them, the one shouting there with the biggest of the beer guts, was shouting back to technical support, I'm not interested in what troubles you're having or why it's gone wrong. I got a business to run. I want this service working now. And I thought, yes, that's what I've been paid for today. You understand it now. That's what things like the simulation can do. You can play games in a safe environment. And the guy would never have in a million years have imagined he would have been saying that in the afternoon. And I got him afterwards and said, what did you just say? He went, oh, yeah, okay. So that's the best success I've ever had in this business. So it's about seeing what's really there. This is a picture of an antelope in there. I didn't even know I'd taken a picture of it until a month later when I was looking at the pictures again. That's, it's taken from a little bit of the picture, but that was taken in the Kruger in South Africa. It's not a zoo. But, you know, the things that are obvious afterwards can be hard to see if you don't know where to look. So that's the message. Right. Oh, I hate that picture. So thank you for your time, and thank you for being here. It's always fun to be in Spain. Thank you.